Come on, Livingston. We gotta go on and on and on. Together we can make it. We gotta go on and on and on. Come on, Livingston.
Knocks it through. Mullen bursting into the box. Josh Mullen.
Together we can make it.
Mullen's ball across, it's turned in! It's Pittman who's got it! Livingston leads!
Road is long.
Can they get the ball back in? O'Brien.
Lead! And Livingston have the lead!
Man, can score.
If we march together.
The full-time whistle blows and David Hayes celebrates! And the Livingston fans join in exultation.
Come on, Livingston.
Livingston have the lead against Rangers, and they are certainly rising to a few occasions on their return to the top flight in Scotland.
Come on, Livingston. We gotta go.
Hello and welcome back to Talk Livi, the podcast dedicated to everything Livingston Football Club and Scottish football, and proudly sponsored by Stjarna Apparel. My name is Angus and today I'm joined by Euan. Euan, how you doing, man?
I'm good, mate. We weekend off from the football, obviously for sad reasons. We weren't involved in the Scottish Cup, but we do have a game to chat about, which was the Dundee United game in midweek, which, let's be honest, I think both of us were expecting probably not to go ahead. So credit where credit's due, the club have managed to get the game on, and we do have something to talk about in that sense. Our women's team were playing over the weekend as well. Unfortunately, neither of us made that game, but they had a very good victory away at Ayr 5-1. Keeps that gap at the top of the table. But yeah, all good. Slightly different weekend, no football involved. But what about yourself, mate? How you doing?
Yeah, very much the same. Very frustrating that we're not in the Scottish Cup, seeing the way that, you know, Inverness have just popped out Kilmarnock as well, and now they're going to, you know, likely be facing one of the Old Firm because, you know, the old cold ball, hot ball will be coming out tonight following Falkirk versus Ayr, to ensure that the final is between, you know, to the two kind of giants. As you said, the women's team there 5-1 victory here, and it's one of the best performances of the season. And that, you know, Ayr were on decent form, so, you know, it's very good to hear that result coming through. Bit disappointed that they couldn't have saved it for us to see it. I feel like we've just been overly negative with them for the last couple of weeks, but, you know, very much glad to hear that, you know, business as usual, and, you know, some good goals to get the 3 points. So looking forward to seeing highlights from that. But as always, you can find this episode as well as all of our others on your preferred podcast streaming sites. Just search for Talk Livi, so follow us or subscribe to ensure you don't miss another episode.
We'll kick the episode off by discussing our midweek draw with Dundee United, as the Lions were made to settle for a point in a very cold West Lothian.
It's the return of Talk Livi question time as we answer questions from our listeners.
And finally, I caught up with Ross from the County Corner to get the lowdown on Ross County before their visit to the Tony Macaroni Arena.
Our midweek game with Dundee United managed to beat the Freeze, but the Lions were made to settle for a point despite taking the lead through Stephen Bradley. Euan, what were your thoughts on what can probably be described as a frustrating game?
Frustrating in the sense that we didn't get the result, but we've sat on this podcast for the last few weeks, Angus, saying that, you know, the performances haven't been quite there, and in particular after the Hibs performance, it was probably one of the worst under Martindale as manager. I think we did get a reaction. I thought the first half performance was excellent, in my opinion. I thought it was everything that we've lacked in the last few weeks in terms of that aggressiveness off the ball to go and win the ball back high up the pitch. I was particularly impressed with our midfield three in Holt, Shinnie and Pittman. I thought Pittman looked back to, you know, nearer his best sort of form. I was really impressed with Shinnie and Holt. I think Holt looked like a man possessed in that first 45 minutes. And I saw a side of Andrew Shinnie, which we're maybe not accustomed to, which was that graft off the ball and aggressiveness to go and win the ball back, as I say. And I was really, really impressed with his first 45 minutes. I think we had 71% possession in the first half, which for us in the top flight is probably unheard of for us to have so much of the ball. And I think at the end of the game, we had maybe something like 60% possession, which again is very high for us in particular. But yeah, we started off very brightly. I thought Stephen Bradley had an effort, which he cracked the crossbar, really unlucky. Foot lower, that's found itself in the top corner. But we did take the lead. Great play by Joel Newbley on the left-hand side, who I think was taking advantage of the fact that Kieran Freeman was on a yellow card. We'll come on to discuss him very shortly, I assume. But he squared him up, got to the byline, got the ball across the 6-yard box, and Bradley was on hand to fire it into the roof of the net. Christian Montano had an effort as well, which he's made a save from. And we'll come on to that second yellow card. So first yellow card got for quite a late challenge on Andrew Shinnie just in front of the Dundee United dugout. The second one, I cannot fathom out how a qualified official hasn't deemed that as a second yellow card. I'm obviously the opposite end of the park from where the challenges happened, but for me, Montano's got wrong side of him. He's running into the 18-yard box for a good attacking opportunity, and Freeman has just quite clearly pulled his jersey. He's made no attempt to win the ball, and he's just pulled his jersey. How is that not a second yellow card, Angus?
Yeah, I say you're at the opposite side of the stand. This was, basically directly in front of me. And, sometimes you can maybe see it as like a referee giving like the player like a final warning or whatnot. But all the circumstances that you look at it for this foul, it's incredible that he didn't show the second yellow card for it. Running into the box, not even a single attempt to look for the ball. He's not even looking at where the ball is. The eyes are straight on the man, 2 arms around him, pulls him down. And yeah, for a referee to not give this, and there's an absolute shocker. And we've been on the end of plenty of kind of decisions this season. And it doesn't seem as if the classic, it evens itself out as kind of going in our way when it comes to red cards this season. In all honesty, this is just I don't see how anybody can look at this and say it's not. And it's emphasised by the fact that what's the first thing Dundee United do following this? They sub them off. They know straight away that they've got away with one. And the referee changes the course of the game essentially by not doing his job essentially. How dominant we were in that first half, how bad Dundee United were playing, how much the Dundee United fans were getting on their back. They go down to 10 men in those circumstances. It's hard to see them getting back into the game, getting any sort of momentum. Completely changes it, and yeah, frustrating. But yeah, we need to go into the rest of the game as well. I guess we eventually kind of do. Have we mentioned the goal yet? Was the red card incidents before or after the goal?
It was after. So we were already 1-0 up, and that probably impacts on the game even more at that point. You're 1-0 up against a team that's bottom of the table, low on confidence. They go down to 10 men. That gives us a good opportunity to go and see that game out or extend the lead. And as you say, credit where credit's due, because Jim Goodwin's taken him straight off because he realises if he's up against Joel Newbley, he was struggling the full game against Joel. If he makes one other foul, he's guaranteed to be off the park. So it's good management by Jim Goodwin to take him off. But I think that in itself highlights how blatant that should have been as a yellow card. I was messaging Andy Whitten, DAFC Stats, who was on the podcast last week, and he was of the opinion that he can understand the frustration, but it was maybe quite early in the game. I don't think how early in the game matters in that context. I'll use Bahambula's red card at Motherwell as an example. He came off the bench, 2 nothing fouls, and he got 2 yellow cards. 2 absolute nothing fouls, whilst the first one is a yellow card, certainty for me, on Shinnie. He's late. Shinnie's got to the ball first. The second one, he's stopping a attacking opportunity, and he's made no attempt to play ball. I can't understand how it's not
even going back to the 2 that Omiyonga got against Rangers. Yeah. The first one's just a nothing film in the middle of the park. Second one, you can maybe see more so because it's in like a dangerous kind of area. But it turns out that Roof stands on Omiyonga instead of him. 2 things that very, very soft, but you get 2 bookings for him, and then we get down to 10 men.
It's appalling, but Dundee United did give us a little scare just before half-time. Really good ball across the 6-yard box by, I think it was Behic on the left-hand side, and Sadat Anaku, who Andy again spoke about, he thought he might feature, which he did. He manages to miss an absolute sitter at the back post, but then I'll use as an example again. How many fouls did Sadat and Aku commit in the first half? I reckon it was at least 6 or 7, and he got booked on the stroke of half-time. And thoroughly enough, Jim Goodwin hooked him at half-time because he was just walking a tightrope. Again, you need to compliment good management in that sense, that he didn't want to see his team go down to 10 men. But how many fouls do you get away with before the referee goes, look, mate, you need to calm down? My dad actually made a joke. He was like, is the number on his back how many fouls he gets to commit before the referee has an actual word with him? But going into the second half, we kind of spoke about it at half-time. We fully expected Dundee United to be better in the second half. Didn't expect them to be as poor. You need to bear in mind that they're a team fighting for their lives at the bottom of the league, and every point could be vital in them staying in the league. And they came out second half. Maybe we sat off a little too deep for my liking because of how good we were in terms of winning the ball high up the pitch in the first half. But you need to give some credit to the opposition in that sense. And the goals a bit sloppy for me. I think there's a couple of elements that Craig Sibbald's got the ball, not enough pressure put on the ball on Sibbald. He's played the ball into the edge of the box. Kai Fotheringham's flicked it up in the air. There's no intent for him to try and play a Behic in this situation, but I think Nicky Devlin's got dragged inside towards the ball, and it's left that space at the back post, and Behic has tucked it away into the far corner. But despite that, I still think in the second half, we still probably edged it, even though we weren't as good as we were in the first half. And then there's another incident where you need to look at a player potentially being sent off, Aina, with a foul on Scott Pittman near the edge of the Dundee United box. How's that not been referred to VAR? It has, for me, so many elements that you could deem serious foul play. It's a straight leg. He's over the ball. There's force in the challenge. How's it not getting looked at by VAR? How come that is just wave play on and with a yellow card? I can't understand how that isn't referred to VAR. And some of the challenges we've seen this season and some of the red cards we've had, it has been referred.
With VAR now, it's just so easy to get into the comparisons of, well, this was given for this, why isn't that? And yeah, you're going back to, Jason Holt against Hibs, Scott Pittman against St Mirren, and you're looking at it and you're like, how are these challenges where, we're kind of like winning the ball and stuff like that deemed so much worse than a challenge like that? It's just so frustrating in that way. There is no consistency within the rules and the way that referees are deploying them, and there's nothing that we can kind of do in that, because it's like the referees maybe get like a slap on the wrist, and then they're kind of back in for the next week or 2 weeks after or whatnot. It's just frustrating in these elements where when it goes against you, it's just like when you see something equally as bad or more lenient getting punished for it. That's the whole thing around the VAR fiascos kind of this season, and it's going to be interesting to see come the summer if there's going to be any revamp to the rules that we're going to deploy or anything like that, because right now it's just an absolute farce.
Yeah, and you need to take into account, again, we talked about that decision in the first half. VAR can't get involved in that because it's 2 yellow cards, fair enough. But again, this is 20 minutes to go. They go down to 10 men for the last 20, 25 minutes. It plays a big part in the game. For me, it's a red card, and it should have got referred, and the referee should have got the opportunity to have another look at that one, in my opinion. But we had another couple of opportunities. Stephen Bradley had an effort tipped onto the post by Birighitti. Whether that would have stood had it sneaked in, I think there was possibly a handball in the build-up to that. So that might, of course, that one would have got referred to VAR had that one snuck in at the near post. But Charlie Mulgrew had a free kick late on, which Jamal George has made a relatively comfortable save from. And then Curtis Guthrie's had a header right at the death, which is blazed well over the bar. But I saw a lot of criticism online after the game, and I get it. Folk are frustrated because they see it. They'll just have a glance at the league table and see Dundee United bottom and almost have this feel like we have this God-given right to go and win that game of football. I felt quite positive after the game in terms of the manner of the performance, and for large spells of the game, I thought was so much better than what we've watched in previous weeks. And I think, as I say, the players and the management have got to try and take the positives from that performance going into the Ross County game. I get the frustration, but personally, I thought some of it was well over the top. My one thing I would maybe agree on was the substitutions in the second half. I think maybe derailed some momentum, looking to try and win the game. But that would probably be my only real criticism of the performance, to be honest, in my opinion.
I kind of probably veered more towards the much frustrated side. Dundee United in that first half were an absolute joke, in all honesty. You could probably ask their fans and they'd probably agree as to how bad they were. Of course, they were going to come out in the second half and play better. But I think we also kind of allowed that a little bit more. We stopped doing the kind of things that were, causing them so many issues. We weren't getting at them so many times with Newplay. The second half just seemed to be a kind of a different game where, everything they were doing well, we kind of like dropped that tempo. And I think, that's fine if it's 2-3-0 up or something like that. But it seemed as if there was quite a drastic change within that allowed them to come back into the game. And I think with that, it's a massive missed opportunity, especially if, we're going to be trying to go for the top six. Dundee United, that first half were there for the taking. Obviously, certain circumstances have affected that. But I think at the end of the day, we've not went into that second half and took control of it ourselves either, I would say. The substitutions, I couldn't agree more. Obviously, we've talked on this podcast for, a number of seasons, and for me, one of the biggest pet peeves that I've had is the substitution of attacking players and putting, certain like unnatural players into those positions and whatnot. I think what was it, the first substitution Anderson came off for?
Bruce Anderson came off, I think, for Stephen Kelly. Stephen Kelly went out to the left-hand side. Newplay went through the middle. But then 5 minutes later, we were making a change to bring Bradley off to put Omiong on. Shinnie went out to the right-hand side.
Yeah.
And then again, we made another change, which was Shinnie coming off, Newplay going out to the right-hand side and Guthrie coming on. I felt the changes maybe derailed their momentum a little bit.
100%. And to be 1-1 chasing a victory, to take off Anderson to me is completely puzzling. To take him off and not bring a striker on is even more so. Then to take off the player who's also scored and hit the woodwork twice, then to bring on a midfielder who's not known for any sort of attacking kind of output is genuinely quite baffling. In all honesty, I think that I think that also took the kind of the wind at the sails of the kind of the support as well. You're looking at those decisions and everybody's kind of looking around like, why? Why are we doing this? We've got some attacking players on the bench. Obviously, we alluded to the likes of Bahambula last week. Are these players just so out of favour or something like that you're not trusted to come on and make a difference? I think when you're looking to get a victory and you're picking centre midfielders to go into the wide areas as opposed to those kind of players, it's maybe a little bit concerning. Same with Guthrie coming on, at the end. If you're going to bring on a striker, I'd like to see another striker coming on rather than, putting Newplay into 3 different kind of positions in the space of, 5-10 minutes or so. But this is something obviously that's kind of been a part of like the kind of what Martindale likes to do. He likes to trust the kind of like centre midfielders in those areas. And it's just one of these times where it's not came off. And I think the growing kind of frustration from the rest of the game is maybe added to that a little bit. And yeah, maybe some of the stuff that was kind of falling in the game was a wee bit excessive just due to that. It all just comes down to the fact that it was just a huge missed chance to gather up some ground on the teams above us. You're probably looking at that game there as the best chance for us to pick up 3 points at home to the bottom of the table team, considering that first half performance as well. So I completely understand the frustrations that many people have with it, especially with those tactical changes made.
Yeah, as I say, I do get the frustration to an extent, and I agree with you. There was a drop-off in terms of the level of performance from the first 45 minutes to the second 45 minutes. I do agree with that. I still think we probably edged that second half, though, regardless of that drop-off. And there are times where you do need to give the opposition a little bit of credit from time to time. And Dundee United came out in the second half and tried to put us under a little bit more pressure. And that's exactly what they did. And probably at the time where they scored, the momentum was with them. But I think after the goal, we took a little bit more control of the game again. As I say, I think what derails that momentum is those changes. And as you say, taking players off and almost fitting them in, square pegs and round holes, essentially. trying to fit them into that system, whilst you've got options on the bench there, the likes of Bahambula, who is more natural probably in those areas of the park, who could come on and make a little bit of difference, because he's very unpredictable, Bahambula. So, you know, he might have had a little creative spark that could have created opportunities for us. But on the whole, personally, as I say, I think the level of performance was so much better than what we've seen in previous weeks. Well, say the Rangers game, the Aberdeen game, the Hibs game, especially that first 45 minutes in terms of the ugly side of the game, which we've been very good at over the years. Is there any players in particular that you think deserve a bit of praise for the game?
I thought Shinnie was great. I think he kind of summed that up pretty well, especially in that first half. I thought he was everywhere, keeping the ball very well. Yeah, just a very experienced performance and somebody who really stepped up, I think. I think going to that back line as well, we had Morgan Boyce and Luigi De Lucas playing together for the first time. And I think, you know, that they deserve some great credit as well. I think probably a lot of us going into that game were thinking it could go, you know, one way or the other because of, you know, maybe their inexperience, and then obviously De Lucas's, you know, lack of game time, still getting used to the Scottish game and whatnot. And I thought those two handled it pretty well as well. I think De Lucas, you know, you could see the confidence in him, maybe overconfident a wee bit at times. I think there's a couple of times where you're looking for your centre half to just, you know, go and clear the ball or whatever. And I think you could maybe see, like, kind of in that first start, he's maybe looking to make that kind of impression. I think there was one in particular he's trying to bring on his chest and that, which is, you know, good if there's plenty of time. But when you've got Stephen Fletcher running right at you to do that and nipping the ball off your toes. But in terms of kind of like a first kind of game, yeah, I was quite impressed by it. And, you know, I feel comfortable if that's going to be a centre half pairing that's going to be featuring against like Ross County this weekend or whatever like that. I would be, you know, relatively happy with that. Newbley was much more back at it as well. How much joy you got down on that left hand side. I think maybe the disappointing aspect for the second half is that we didn't really see that as much. But that first half, he absolutely ran them ragged. Him and Montano combining on that left wing, doing absolutely tremendous. So yeah, I do agree that there was a lot more kind of back to the usual kind of way, and a lot of key performers. Hopefully that kind of continues from here. It just kind of kicks us off in what's going to be an important run into the end of the regular season.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Andrew Shinnie. I don't know if it was actually in the final edit of our podcast, but me and you spoke about our run of form in January, and Andrew Shinnie featured a lot in that and was arguably had his best run of games playing for us in the month of January, and probably a bit unlucky to see himself out the side again. But I thought he stepped up on Wednesday night and was excellent. As I say, done things that I didn't maybe know he had in his locker in terms of the uglier side of the game, aggressiveness in the middle of the park. But he showed a lot of experience, as you say, at times in terms of his ball retention, which I don't think anyone can really question with Andrew Shinnie, that aspect of his game. Again, I'll go back to Holt and Pittman. I thought they looked much more like their usual selves. And you're right, a lot of credit needs to be given to De Lucas. You mentioned one where he took it down to his chest. I think there was one he tried to play a pass with the outside of his boot through, I think, 3 Dundee United players, maybe a little bit ambitious. And there was a couple of occasions he was maybe caught out when he's tried to bring the ball down and play out. I don't know if there was maybe a message from Davy to, at times, just take the simple route out and clear your lines and get the ball at the pitch, get it into the channels for the likes of Newbley or the likes of Bradley to run onto. And I thought he had a very good debut against, let's remember, Stephen Fletcher is a very, very good centre forward, despite
Premier League and League One.
Yeah, exactly. He's played at a very high level throughout his career, been capped for his country, so he's no mug. And I do think De Lucas and Morgan Boyce dealt with Stephen Fletcher for the most part very, very well. So a lot of credit to Luigi on a debut on a very cold night as well, which pretty much the welcome you would expect him to get in this time of year in Scottish football. But as I said, there's a lot of aspects in the performance that are encouraging going into what is a run of fixtures, which will probably define, our season, whether it's a what-if season or it's a very successful one. So there's a lot of positives to take, and hopefully we can take those aspects of the performance into the Ross County game. We're delighted to have Strana Apparel as sponsors of Talk Livi. UK based with a Swedish soul, we are Strana. Strana is an independent fashion brand from Scotland who create high quality and stylish attire for on and off the terraces. Inspired by terrace culture, lifestyle and music, all their clothing is designed using quality materials and workmanship to combine the very best style and fit. All of this means you get a premium quality fashion at affordable prices while enjoying a simple and secure service.
As a bonus for Talk Livi listeners, you can get 10% off your order using the code TalkLivi at the checkout. We'll also have some exclusive giveaways during the season, so keep your eyes peeled on our socials for those too. And thanks to Strana for sponsoring Talk Livi.
It's the return of Talk Livi question time as we answer questions sent in to us by the listeners. We'll just dive straight in, Angus. This one's worded very subtly from Angela Preston. Why are Livi doing so bad? Essentially, is the gist of that one. Angus, give us your expert opinion.
Yeah, I guess just straight to the point. I think obviously teams go kind of through like a bad run of form. I think maybe the Inverness game is kind of is one that's kind of outlier here. There's kind of like tough games that we've had up. I think essentially we've just not been, quite at it. The usual attributes that we associate with our team that has got us great success in the last couple of years is definitely been that kind of like hard working, whilst also having that kind of quality on the ball. Quite simply, Euan, we've not had that. We've not had, the same kind of fight and kind of dig that's kind of like got us over the line so many times. And at the end of the day as well, there's not been any quality. Simple as that. We've not had many kind of clear chances, through open play. Obviously barring that Dundee United game there. But I'm confident in saying that is very much just a blip. And some teams go through that, especially teams in Scotland within the Premiership. I think they all go through these kind of periods. And if at the end of the day it's going to be, 3 games against, kind of like Rangers, Hibs and Aberdeen, then that's fair. The more concerning thing would be if it was to happen against Dundee United there, and if it was going to happen against Ross County this weekend. But yeah, you don't become a bad team overnight, Euan. We're not a bad team. I think there's plenty of positive signs from Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever day it was. It was, almost a week ago. I think rein it in a little bit. Not a bad team. And hopefully we'll be putting things right and getting back to winning ways against Ross County this weekend.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Angus. You need to take into account the run of fixtures we've had. We had Hearts at the end of January who are sitting third. You draw with them, which is a reasonable result, I would say, against Hearts pretty much any season, getting a draw against Hearts. You play Celtic at Celtic Park, who have only dropped 5 points all season, sorry. You've got Rangers, who are currently still unbeaten in the league under a new manager. You play Aberdeen, who had just sacked their manager and have been extremely good at Pittodrie this season. That is where we played the game. And then you come up against a very informed Hibs side. As you say, the one major outlier in that is the Inverness game, which, I can absolutely understand the frustrations, and we were equally as frustrated after that game. So I don't think there's many games that you would assume Livingston should go and win them, other than probably that Inverness game and that kind of run of games. And amongst that, we had that fantastic performance against Kilmarnock, which we had earmarked for the month of February as probably being the game that we need to go and pick up 3 points in. But let's take a little bit of perspective. We're sitting 7th in the top flight in Scotland. We're the 7th best team in the country at this moment in time. And we finished the 7th best team in the country last year. For a club our size, our support, our budget, are Livingston FC doing bad?
I think we do have to suffice that the performance in, those 4 games were pretty crap, to be fair.
Yeah, I'm absolutely not. I'm absolutely not defending it in that sense. I agree that I know I've watched this team long enough to know that they can perform better than they had done in those particular games. But again, sometimes you need to give opposition a little bit of credit, and the circumstances where we've come to face these teams, they're all in decent positions at that point in time when we've come on to face them. And granted, if we perform maybe a little bit better, we could have snuck a couple more results, a few more points here and there, but we're still in a very good position. We're a point off top 6. We're 4 points behind Hibs, who are sitting in 4th.
They're
Our
not
season's very much still alive.
they're not the games that we should be basing our season upon. It's not been good enough the last kind of couple of weeks, but yeah, it's not what we should be looking at. It's not what we should be defining our season. It's not what we should be brandishing our team as. Let's see how it goes for the next part, and yeah, hopefully things will be picking up very, very soon for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, another question we had was from Mike Walker. Who is Nicky Devlin's replacement and new club captain? Now, we want to put on good authority. It's not confirmed that Nicky Devlin's leaving, but he is out of contract at the end of the season. He is club captain, so naturally, fans are going to ask the question, if Nicky was to leave, what would happen in that sense? Angus, what's your view on this one?
Yeah, first of all, would love for Nicky to stay. Obviously being a fantastic servant for us, being great over the years. If he is to move on, obviously that's going to be a massive, massive hole for us to be filling in. And I think that's maybe going to be, one of the challenges that comes into the summer transfer window. Obviously, each year we're used to players kind of leaving and moving on and kind of finding new replacements for them. Right now, it's kind of difficult to kind of speculate about that. Obviously, the future of the player isn't decided. We've only kind of got Jamie Brandon, who kind of plays at right back as well. He's only made a kind of couple of appearances this season. Obviously, he's not had an awful lot of game time this year, so we don't know if he's essentially up to the standard of playing the Premiership in all honesty yet, because of the lack of time that we've seen him play. Just some kind of quick thoughts of it, looking at the sort of other free agents in the market who we're going to have to probably be looking at. We're not really going to be paying any money to bring anybody in. There's a couple of names that maybe stand out. You've got the likes of Stephen O'Donnell at Motherwell, whose contract's coming to the end of the season. Not sure if they'll be keeping him on. I don't think he's been playing too well. Would that be a bad option, considering the experience that he has, who could be coming to this team, would maybe prove to be quite valuable? Somebody who I really like in this league, who's going to be coming to the end of their contract as well, is Richard Tate from St Mirren. Obviously, he's getting on a little bit more, but I think Richard Tate's always been a very decent player. Very, very solid. He knows the league well. Played well for Motherwell over the years as well as St Mirren. Maybe somebody like that wouldn't be, a too bad an option. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be hard to replace Nicky Devlin in terms of that kind of, the leadership and the attacking qualities as well. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting in that aspect in terms of covering that right back position if he is to go away. Hopefully that isn't the case, and we get to enjoy his time at Livingston a wee bit more. As for captain, though, you're looking at the current squad, and again, I guess that comes down to who's going to be here next season as well. In all honesty, if you were asking me and Devlin was to move on, but some of the others were to stay, Jason Hope would probably be my choice for club captain. Again, another player whose contract expires in the summer. Maybe that's going to be somebody who moves on as well. We'll need to replace. I think when you take that out of consideration, it's maybe there's going to be a wee bit of a good thing going to be needed to have for that. I think somebody like Pittman is obviously a club legend in that. Is he somebody who takes the armband and kind of leads that way? Do you maybe make him the club captain as that kind of, he sets the standard on the pitch with the kind of intensity and those kind of performances, as opposed to the kind of shouting orders and stuff like that. I remember when John Guthrie was here, he was the vice captain under Bartley, and he probably didn't have the same kind of he didn't have maybe the same kind of qualities that likes of Bartley and maybe Nicky Devlin had when they were kind of giving out orders and whatnot, but really led by example and the kind of what to do on the pitch and stuff like that. So maybe that's an avenue that'll come in. But yeah, you also look at that as well. Maybe somebody who comes in and could end up being the kind of the club captain. I think that happened eventually with Bartley. Yeah, who knows if maybe that'll come in. You got any kind of thoughts on a current player who elsewhere would maybe make a good choice?
You mentioned Stephen O'Donnell as an option coming in. I think he could almost come in and be club captain as well, with the experience that he's got, both within the league and obviously doing a job for Scotland over the years as well in recent times. But another option I kind of saw floating about was Cammy Kerr, who's at Dundee. He's out of contract at the end of the season. He's got, again, experience in the top flight. Depending on Dundee's situation, if they were to go up, he might look at that as a good option to get back into the top flight and playing at the highest level in Scotland. He's only 27 as well, so he's a possible option at fullback. But in terms of the captaincy, I'm going to base it on players who are out of contract, not going to be here. So I agree with you. If Jason Hope was to stay on, I think he would be a pretty natural option for that. Pittman, vocally, as you say, probably you wouldn't expect him to be a captain, but I don't think necessarily a captain has to bark orders all the time. And he sets the standard at the football club. I said this recently, doing bits and pieces on other podcasts and things like that. He sets that standard that Livy and has done for the last number of years. Whether Pitts would want the armband or not, I think is a different question. I feel Pitts likes to go under the radar and have as little attention on him as possible. One I personally thought of, again, for how he handles himself on the pitch is Stephen Kelly. I know it's maybe a bit of an outside option, but I think going forward, especially with a few of our midfielders being out of contract, we could be building a team around Stephen Kelly for the next couple of years. Is he an option? I know I'm biased on this one. I think another player that the way he handles himself on the pitch, and he's my new favourite player at Livingston, Sean Kelly. I would throw his name in the hat as well, personally, for the captaincy. That's a personal opinion, and it's not based on them being, vocal on the pitch as such. The way I look at it is how they handle themselves on the pitch in terms of how they act and kind of lead on the pitch, and those are potential options, I would say. I know I can see your face on the camera, Angus, as soon as I mentioned Sean Kelly.
Yeah, I'm not as convinced, but it's going to be an interesting one. There isn't really, obviously, when Craig Halkett left, there was maybe a couple of candidates you could maybe look at when obviously it was announced that he was leaving. I think Declan Gallagher was already away, but you also had Lithgow was still there. Liam Kelly was still there to our knowledge at the time. You had the likes of Jacobs, Sean Burns still there at the time. I think for this one, it's maybe a wee bit more difficult in that stance where, that uncertainty that's in the air, there's not an awful lot of options within there that you'd maybe kind of come straight to your head. Maybe even something like Shamal George could maybe even be a decent enough kind of idea for it. Not too keen on goalkeepers being captains, in all honesty.
They see the full game, though. They see the full game.
Yeah, but I guess not to discredit goalkeepers for a reason, but they're goalkeepers for a reason. But not to discredit the work they do. I mean, you look at Craig Gordon and David Marshall are captains at their respective clubs. I think Joe Hart and Alan McGregor are probably both vice captains as well. So maybe it isn't too bad a shout there as well. I think Joe Lewis in recent years for Aberdeen, maybe that's the path that we need to go on to. But yeah, that'll be interesting. I think maybe the summer business could be quite defining in that as well.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting one, and one that's very much up for debate. But another question that came in, Aidan Kay, who should take Livy's next penalty? Now, I think the last time we did this, it was probably in the height of our penalty antics, we'll put it that way, in terms of not scoring them, to put it bluntly. I think we both kind of had the same opinion that we were looking at probably Bruce Anderson's going to go and grab the ball more than anything.
Yeah, surely. The amount of chances that we've had, and we've not really had a natural forward as other than can Chalves take a penalty. I think that kind of seems like a no-brainer for us, in all honesty. Yeah, it just makes me a bit sense. Player who wants to score goals, players desperate to get on the score sheet. Yeah, give it to Bruce, and if he ends up missing there, then back to the drawing board, I guess. But Bruce, if you're listening, please be practicing penalties.
Yeah, for me, it's a no-brainer that Bruce would probably be the next option. Your number 9, your joint top goal scorer as well, your top goal scorer from last year. So that's a pretty obvious one for me. Another question that came in from Scott Allen starts off, not a question as such, but how about picking a combined 11 between our current team and Jim Leishman's side of 2002? Not sure how old you guys are, mind you, and whether you'd remember it. I can certainly remember it. I'm 31, so I've got a decent memory of it. What about yourself, Angus?
Yeah, a decent enough memory of it as well. Yeah, 2002, so that'll be the third place side, correct?
Correct, yes.
In all honesty, I think this can be quite easy, Euan. The third place side, I don't think there's too much kind of leeway, perhaps as opposed to a couple of our positions. Maybe one that's maybe closer than we maybe think. I'm not saying that I'm picking Shamal George here, but Shamal George is a very, very capable keeper. The issue is he's up against Sanchez Broto, who is probably arguably the most gifted goalkeeper that Livingston have probably ever had. Modern goalkeeper as well in that kind of way, with the kind of like kicking and stuff and that. Celtic signed them off of us as well, so Sanchez Broto gets the nod there, surely, right?
Yeah, I would agree. Broto, personally, my favourite ever goalkeeper at Livingston was Neil Alexander. Obviously, had 2 very successful spells at the football club, and I'll always have a soft spot for him for being the man that finally convinced me we were going up in those playoffs when he saved that penalty from Connor Salmon. But in terms of ability, Broto was light years ahead of his time, actually, in terms of his distribution with the ball. I remember a back and forth
Broto would
with
be
David.
playing for Man City right now if he.
Genuinely, it would be Pep's dream. It would be Pep's dream the way he can kick a football. It was that slice and volley that he used to do and find his man. Incredible accuracy that Broto had with his feet, and he would be a modern day goalkeeper. I think I'd love to see how much he would be worth in today's game, because back then you didn't really use your goalkeeper for their ability to play out from the back. It was very much get the ball at the back and play off second balls from a big volley up. How many times do you see keepers play the ball from hand now, in fact? But Broto, I can only imagine he would be worth a good few million these days in terms of what he offers with the ball at his feet. So yeah, for me, that's a no-brainer. The positions that I think threw up a bit of debate for me were at fullback. Personally, we had the 2 bouncers back in the day in 2002, Philip Branquin and Gary Bolin. Thou shall not passive unless you've got ID. And they were a bit of a toss-up with Nicky Devlin, who's again had a very successful spell at the football club. This season, it's kind of been a toss-up between James Penrice, Christian Montano, but both have been very, very good when they featured this season at left-back, and Gary Bolin was as steady Eddie at left-back as you could probably ask for. So that was where I had the biggest kind of toss-up. I went with Nicky Devlin, not because we're biased because we sponsor him or anything like that, but I went with Nicky Devlin. My back 4 consisted of Marvin Andrews, Oscar Rubio. I think 2 fantastic centre-halves in their spell at Livi. And I was really on the edge with this one. I didn't really know who to pick out the 3. I went with Christian Montano based off his form purely this season. I think he's been excellent this season for the vast majority, so I kind of went with him, but I love Gary Bolin to bits. I loved him when he was manager of the football club as well, so that was quite tough. What about yourself?
I agree I'll go with Devlin, Rubio and Andrews. I think I did like the thing in the programme last season, you come up with your all-time like 11, and 3 of them were in my back 5. So fully agreement there. I think Devlin, the Livingston career that he's had has been, very good. Yeah, very much deserving that spot. It's quite an interesting one there as well, because you look at right back, Branquin, Devlin, and then even throw like Dave McNamee in there. Quite spoiled for choice in there. Quite like the club is very young, but there is like a good debate amongst the kind of like 3 decades that we've kind of been going for. Left back, I'll edge Bolin. Maybe edge him just because of more so of the game time that he's probably had. Obviously, Montano's had a great season so far, but obviously a wee bit of injuries kind of playing into it there. I'm going to give Bolin the nod in this matter because of how often he kind of played. Maybe come the end of the season, if Montano continues to get goals and assists, I'll maybe revisit it. But I'm going to stick with the tried and trusted so far. Moving into the midfield, I think you've got some strong opinions here. One of your favourite players who's ever played for us, Lee Makel, makes it into the team for you. I think Stuart Lovell, obviously captain as well. You look at that, iconic moments, overhead kick against Rangers, and then obviously the CIS Cup win later on in the season. Them 2 alongside Pittman is probably going to be the choice, right?
Yeah, my midfield 3 was Makel, Lovell and Pittman. I think Lovell would fit into our current team over the last few years. I think he's that type of player. He had a lot of energy, he got about the park really well, was a grafter. But he also produced, as you say, some special moments that season. The overhead kick against Rangers can't be forgotten. The wee flick the day we qualified for Europe against Dunfermline, putting us 1-0 up, I believe, in that game. So Stuart Lovell produced some fantastic moments for Livi, and obviously later in his Livingston career, he had some exceptional moments, biggest moments in the club's history, which was lifting the League Cup in 2004. Lee Makel, I've said it plenty of times when we do these sort of things on the podcast, he's one of my favourite players that I've watched at Livingston. Just thought he was an incredibly technically gifted midfielder, really good on the ball. Again, had a fantastically successful spell at the club. Maybe not so much second time round later in his career when he came back when we were in the first division. But Lee Makel was I loved watching Lee Makel play. Just, as I say, such a technically gifted footballer. And then, how can you not pick Pitts? It should be against the law not to have a Livingston 11 that doesn't feature Scott Pittman. I don't need to say anything about Pitts and why he's in the team. The only one that was potentially swaying me was Keano. Again, kind of in that bracket is Lee Makel. Keano, what a wonderfully gifted midfielder he was. Technical ability was remarkable and scored a few special goals as well in his time at the club. Unfortunately, his time was cut short due to the financial difficulties in kind of 2003, 2004 when we went into administration. But I was swaying on him, but I went with Lee Makel, Stuart Lovell over Keano. And I'm sure there's folk that will disagree with me on that.
I think as well, something that could maybe be interesting is if we get top six again this season, would be, do you include an Omi Younger or a Holt in there? Just because of obviously, the success that those guys that we've mentioned, from the past were great. If we are able to get like a season where, we have top six, 2 times and then obviously a 7th place finish there, is that a success that can maybe start to outweigh, some of the other players, that kind of top level kind of like finishes, that top half finish is, something that we've never really kind of done before. We've done it once pre coming up here. So maybe the likes of Holt or that could maybe sway into that. Perhaps if we finish in the top 6 here, I would maybe be looking at, maybe Holt, Lovell, Pittman if that is the case. But I guess I'll go with Quino instead. Actually, I'll put a wee bit more flair inside of there. But I'll keep Holt on the reserve list just there. I guess we can move on to the forward line. I'm liking that we've just kind of assumed it's like a 4-3-3 kind of sort.
Well, it was a 4-3-3. Big Jim played back in the day, yeah. So it's currently kind of the system we prefer just now. So it'd be consistent to go 4-3-3. I have to say.
Yeah. So attacking options from back then, obviously we got David Fernandez, who is probably first name in the team sheet alongside Pittman, as because he's probably technically the greatest player that we've ever had. Going up with Bingham, we'll have David Souza. Who else would he be in the forward? Barry Wilson. Oh, Barry Wilson's that throws a bit of a this is I'll go Fernandez. I'm going to go Fernandez, Barry Wilson, and I'm going to go Newbley.
David Bingham not making your all-time Livingston team.
I'm not sure what the stats are, Euan. I'll need to have a wee look and see what the Premiership. Any ideas off the top of your head how many goals he got for us in the top flight season?
I wouldn't know off the top of my head, but I think the first season he maybe hit double figures, or he got 8 or 9 at least. Just off the top of my head.
I remember, I don't know if it's maybe like kind of a wee bit of nostalgia coming in as well. I think I associate more memories with Barry Wilson than I do with Bingham, which is perhaps giving me a wee bit of an advantage there. I think, what was it? Did he get a double in the kind of the UEFA Cup game? He scored some screamers as well. Scored a screamer in that game against Rangers that we won 2-1 as well, right? I don't think is that massively out there. I guess obviously Bingham was, kind of the top goal scorer. Maybe through the divisions, maybe a bigger Livingston legend, but maybe in that top flight season, I don't know. Screw it. I'll stick with Wilson.
The thing is, I was really struggling with that one, to be fair, as well, because I loved Barry Wilson when I was younger. If I remember correctly, if I was to go and double check when I was mascot and I got asked who my favourite player was, I think I said Barry Wilson. That was during the 02-03 season. So Fernandez is a shoo-in. I have to say, for me, Bingham as well, and I went with Newbley. I think that's a front three that would cause absolute chaos and carnage. And I tell you what, I think they'd be bloody entertaining to watch as well. You wouldn't know what to expect week on week from that three. Obvious reasons, Fernandez, Livingston fans. As you say, there'll be Livingston supporters who, and I agree with you, there's maybe more of an association with Bingham when we were coming up through the leagues from the second division upwards. But yeah, I still think David Bingham produced some great moments when we were in the top flight as well. So yeah, that would be my front three, would be Bingham, Newbley and Fernandez.
I think it definitely maybe, kind of my age kind of coming into it a little bit more, where the kind of things that I'm associating Barry Wilson with. But it could very well be that David Bingham did outscore him in terms of that. Either way, I think any selection from those kind of four is not too bad. I guess people can let us know if they have any major disagreements, if there's anybody who we've omitted completely, or just in general what people's teams would be as well.
Absolutely, get involved and let us know your thoughts on that. I think between the two of us, we were in debate about the exact same positions throughout that. So it's probably the areas I think most folk would maybe struggle with. But last question was from Murray Dunn. Why do you think Livi is unable to really increase its fan base despite a number of successful seasons? We seem to only have about a third of the fans we had in the early 2000s. There's a number of ways you can answer this question. I think back at the time when we were coming up through the leagues, we were a novelty. The club having recently moved to West Lothian, there was a lot of folk who might have come down just to see what all the fuss was about. We were obviously having a very successful and upward trajectory at the time. So again, that kind of piques people's interests, and there was a lot of free ticket giveaways going on about, which I know is a big debate most times on the forum. But we were giving away free tickets for every single game. And there was a lot of people, myself included, that ended up getting hooked off the back of that and did become a paying customer for my sins for some of the seasons after that. But for me, the reason why we don't have that number of people is there are a number of people who supported Celtic or Rangers, Hearts or Hibs, either side of Livingston, who came along. They were always Celtic or Rangers or Hearts or Hibs fans. And when things have started taking a downward turn at Livingston, they've gone back to just being an armchair supporter at those respective clubs. The catchment area of Livingston, you're naturally going to unfortunately suffer from that. They're a relatively new club as well, albeit we have history steeping back to the 1940s with Ferranti Thistle, but Livingston itself has only been in West Lothian since 1995, so you need to take that into account as well. Also, the number of years of mismanagement of the football club probably drove a lot of people away because of the antics going on with the football club off the pitch. I don't think that would have helped in terms of retaining supporters. 2 separate spells of administration, getting punted right down the leagues. That's not going to help. But on a positive note to it all, I think, speaking to Dave Black, I think he said there was maybe a 20-25% increase on season tickets from last year. So it is slowly building up. I don't think we'll ever get to the heights of having 6,000-7,000 in the home end at Livingston ever again, because I don't think there is 6,000-7,000 Livingston fans just sitting not coming to games. It's going to take years and years to build that up, but there are small increases. But the reality of it is the core support of Livingston is about 1,200, I would say, and it's going to take years and years. But the more years we have being successful and staying at this level, the more likely it is that folk will come along and stick and be a Livingston fan, for years and years to come.
I think one of the biggest issues as well that comes with it is, that infancy that the club is in, under 30 years old. I actually wrote an article about this for our uni magazine that we're having, and we're a club who, right now is probably for the first time going through that generation where people who have growing up supporting the club are now going to be bringing their children. Obviously, we would have went with our parents, but my dad didn't grow up a Livingston fan. He's an Aberdeen fan. Plenty of other people I know that. Our good friend Callum Brown, I'm pretty sure, found out that his dad was from, kind of like the Paisley area and used to go to see Sunderland and that, and it was from coming to Livingston. People like ourselves, Euan, are going to be the first kind of generations who are going to be, we're kind of like first generation Livingston fans, and then if we have kids now, are going to be passed on to that. That's something that's massive and kind of benefiting that. Obviously, whenever you talk about the old firm and all of that, that's usually the big excuse that they have is, oh yeah, it's who my family supports from that, just to cover up that they're a bit of a glory hunter. If that is true as what people would say, then it's no wonder to see as to why Livingston have never had that then, because I simply haven't been around to have that kind of generational thing passed on. Maybe that'll make a difference into it. I think it definitely will, in all honesty, because it kind of keeps it into that, and you can be kind of properly indoctrinated as you said there, the kind of free tickets and that, people were coming along just because, it was free. They can kind of do stuff. As soon as that kind of disappeared, a lot of people didn't have that emotional attachment. They seen it as something to do. They didn't have that connection to the club. As soon as the tickets disappeared and things weren't going so well, it's easy to just go and get a Sky Sports subscription and pretend that you're part of whatever success one half of the old firms have in that season or whatever. But yeah, I think there's things to be positive about, and in the next kind of couple of years we can hopefully maybe see that to come. Being cornered by the 4 of the 5 biggest clubs in the country doesn't help. But yeah, we'll see what happens in the future, and hopefully there'll be many people coming in to support us furthermore. I think it's good to see that even kind of like away games, we're seeing kind of younger people come in to go and support Livingston away at Ibrox and stuff like that. Obviously, it's not massive numbers, but it's a start.
Yeah, exactly. As I say, it's something that's going to take years and years. The football club is young, as I say, in the sense that it's not even 3 decades that they've been based in Livingston. You've got other football clubs that have got hundreds of years worth of tradition and history, and as you say, that generational thing where it's been passed down that they support that club. I'm like you, Angus. My dad was a Boyhood United fan and used to follow them up and down the country. When we moved to Linlithgow, so we were in West Lothian, he decided to take me along to see the senior side in West Lothian. That was Livingston, and I am one of those kids that got hooked. But we always talk about this free ticket, give away free tickets, give away free tickets. I think the way the club's operating it now is probably a better way of doing it. Promoting it maybe 3 or 4 times a season and giving away those opportunities for free ticket giveaways, because at the end of the day, the club is a business and it needs to make money. It needs to try and convert these people into becoming a paying customer. And if you just give them a free ticket for every single home game, when it comes to then trying to pay for it, they're probably not going to. And that's the sad thing. One of my pals is a Rangers fan. He took his daughter along. I think it was to the Ross County game. God, unfortunately didn't get the result. We lost 1-0. But she was apparently absolutely buzzing about it for days and days afterwards. So it's trying to get that, the younger generations hooked on the football club, and that creates fans in the future as well. But it's a difficult one. It's not an easy one to answer, in the sense that there's no magical way that we can all of a sudden generate an extra 3,000-4,000 Livingston fans in the home end. I don't think there is 3,000-4,000 Livingston fans just sitting out there, but it's one you could sit and debate for hours and hours and hours on end. But thank you to everyone that did send in your questions. We'll obviously do this section again later in the season as well. I'm delighted to welcome Ross from the County Corner onto the podcast. Ross, how you doing, mate?
I'm good, thank you, Euan. Thank you for having me on.
No, it's a pleasure to have you on. Now, after what was a pretty good season for Ross County last year, safe to say this year's been a bit more of a struggle, hasn't it?
Aye, I think that's a good way to put it. I think start of the season, I think expectations were high after the way last season went. I think we had a decent transfer window at the time. Losing Reagan Charles Cook, Blair Spittle, Joseph Hungbo, that was a lot of goals that we lost out of our team. In the summer, we got through the League Cup group pretty unscathed. It's kind of looking positive for the season, and even the first couple of games against Hearts away at Tynecastle probably should have been 2 or 3-0 up at half time there, and you're kind of thinking, okay, this could be another kind of good season on the horizon. Ended up losing the game there. And then after that, I think it was Celtic at home was our second game, and we pushed them right until the 85th minute, and there was a lot of positives there to take. But then after that, I think there was a few just inconsistencies, especially in the forward areas in the park. The trio that we had up front last year of Charles Cook, Hungbo, and Jordan White, it was really clicking. They were all working really well. The two wingers knew when to play off Jordan, when to come short, when to go long. But I don't think that was quite the same this season. We've just not quite had the same balance or cohesion, especially in the first half of the season. Jordan was still playing very well, doing the usual target man job, holding up the ball, chipping in with the odd goal. But it was more the wide areas that, it wasn't quite clicking. There was, players making a run that when they should be coming short or vice versa. And then it wasn't just quite as fluent there. So got to the World Cup break. Prior to that, we just went into like a 3-5-2, just changed it slightly, which kind of improved results. Picked up a win against St Mirren at home, and then away to Easter Road back to back, which was good, and then followed up again by a good performance against Celtic at Parkhead. Came back from the World Cup. We started the 3 at the back, but then once we lost Jack Baldwin to a red card against St Johnstone, we kind of almost shifted them back to the back 4. And I would say the positive performances and results at that time then dipped again. It was almost the timing of that. But then after the Hamilton Cup game in the middle of January, for the Kilmarnock game, we then shifted back to a back 3 to fit Eamon Brophy in alongside Jordan White. And since then, performances have been good. I mean, we've only picked up 7 points out of 18, but I think on the whole, apart from the game away in Paisley, performances have been very, very good. And we've been unlucky in, last weekend, a red card changes the game again. Away at Rangers, it's a deflected free kick that gives them 3 points. They kind of were well in the game up until that point as well. So I think it's been up and down this season, but I think it's definitely positive since the January transfer window.
Yeah, I've seen you kind of commenting every now and then in the SFF group chat, and you've mentioned you've actually been relatively happy with the performances in recent weeks. It's just not had some results to go with it at times. Yeah,
I think that's the best way to put it. I mean, it was a great win against Kilmarnock and deserved, and then it was a good battling draw against Hibs. I mean, it was just the weather that day was hellish, so it was just going to be who kind of comes out on top and who's going to win the battle there. And when you're scoring an equaliser direct from a corner in those kind of conditions, it tells you what kind of game it was. And then away at Ibrox, they played really, really well. And again, as I said, it's just a deflected free kick that cost them, potentially taking a point away from there. Then it was then back into another cup break then, and away at St Mirren, they didn't start well, conceded early on, and just never kind of got to the grips of the game. You know what kind of team St Mirren are. Once they go ahead, they're very difficult to, kind of get back into the game. They manage the games. And then after that, Dundee United, it's a relegation 6-pointer. You're going into that needing to win. Okay, Dundee United were very poor on the day, but County were excellent and probably could have and should have had 7 or 8, and that wouldn't have been harsh on United. Just County were excellent that day and United poor. But then last weekend, up until the red card, from a County point of view, but even trying to look at it neutrally, it looked like there was only going to be one team that goes on to win it at that point. A lot of the play was going towards the Motherwell goal, pending at times. There wasn't really kind of many clear-cut chances, but it almost looked like if the ball was going to break in either box, it looked like it was going to break for us. But yeah, then the red card just totally changes the flow of the game, and then that kind of gives Motherwell the boost to go on and pick up 3 points there. So overall, it's definitely been a lot better since January. Hopefully, it continues on Saturday.
Hopefully not, from our perspective. But yeah, you kind of mentioned in the summer it was a difficult window, losing the likes of Hungbo, Charles Cook in particular. I actually forget Blair Spittle. I'm a big fan of him. I think he's quite underrated, Blair Spittle. But did you anticipate that County were maybe going to struggle in the final third as much as they have this season after losing them?
No, I think it was maybe looking at the League Cup games. The last League Cup game before the season started, we put 7 past
East Fife, was it?
Yeah, and it's okay. You can't really judge it on that when you're putting 7 past a League 2 team. But you're kind of thinking, okay, if this clicks, we can score goals again. We can do well. Jan Danda in the number 10 role behind Jordan White with 2 decent wingers. It almost looked like, right, we've kind of replaced the players that we've lost pretty well.
Yeah.
And we can kick on, have a decent season, maybe not push top 6, have a decent season, finish top of the bottom 6 perhaps, or kind of kick on from there. But no, it was surprising. It was just like we just struggled to create chances, I think there was no, I don't know, cohesion in the forward areas between the front 3, front 4 at times. But yeah, I think that's resolved a decent amount now. So
yeah, and it was a tough start to the season. I think it was 1-1 and 9 from the opening league games. But did it then come as a bit of a surprise when you turned us over in West Lothian? Again, I remember chatting to you in the group chat, and you were pretty convinced, given your record in West Lothian, that we were going to walk all over you. But it turned out complete opposite. You guys stuck away with 3 points.
I think so, and I think it was the midweek before that game as well, is when we got beat 5-0 by Motherwell in Dingwall. So I think, obviously morale was quite low at that time amongst a lot of county fans, and as you said there, our record down at you guys isn't good. That was our first win since 2013. I've got it noted down here.
I think it was the season you guys won the first division.
Yes,
far back as that, yeah. So
and I've even got it noted down here. I think it's we've only beaten you guys twice in 14 meetings, including obviously the ones this season. So it shows that we've not got the best record. So kind of going down there, it's a tough place to go for any team in the league. Never mind with the record that we've got. It was like, okay, if we can get a point and kind of try and rebuild a bit of confidence, and after that 5-0 loss, then we'll take it. But it was a total smash and grab, which I think was then mirrored by the game in January, which I thought at the same time that was a bit of a smash and grab too. So I think it's probably evened out fairly between the two results between the teams. But it was nice to go down to Livingston and actually come away with a decent result.
It's hilarious because we do these community giveaways with like free tickets, and we've not won a game yet when we've done it. And we did the giveaway for the Ross County game, and we're going, oh no. And I think I said to you in the group chat, I was like, we're a gift for teams on a bad run. Yeah. And that's exactly what came to fruition that day. You guys managed to sneak the 3 points. But
totally.
Yeah, since the winter break, you have talked about it in detail there, but I think it's 7 defeats in 12, but there have been some big results in amongst that. You mentioned the win against Kilmarnock, the win against Dundee United as well. Are you confident that County can avoid relegation? Because it looks now, just having a glance at the league table, that it's starting to become a kind of 2 from 3, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And especially after Saturday, I think Saturday was a bit of a blow, to lose that game. Even if we came away with a point, I think it would have been okay. Motherwell are still, within touching distance, but between now and the split and after the split as well, you just don't know. I think Motherwell are on the verge of being safe if they can maybe pick up 1 or 2 more wins. I think they're out of it now. But I think it's going to be 2 of the 3. But you just mentioned there, since the World Cup, I think I've done my maths right saying this. Only Rangers and Celtic have conceded less goals than County since the return from the World Cup. Right. I think it's 15 that County have conceded, and I think Hearts have conceded the same as well. So, I think that's improved compared to the start of the season where we were maybe leaking goals. I said there, like the 5-0 loss against Motherwell, 4-0 Ibrox, things like that. So I think we've shored up defensively there. And in the last 6 games, we've scored 9 goals. And in the first 22 games of the season, we'd only scored 15.
Yeah.
So that's just about a third of the goals so far that I've scored this season come in the last 6 games, So there's definitely been a change. As you said there, there have been a few losses in there, and I think performances maybe deserve more points, especially since the Hamilton Cup game, But if we can continue to build, the break maybe now has come at a good time after the Motherwell loss. We were having, the World Cup break. We were having a good run of form. We were building a bit of momentum. It was then halted, come back in. We struggled to get going. And anytime these kind of breaks have come in, it's almost when they've been on the back of a good result or a good performance. Yeah. So it might be a good thing that it was maybe a bit of a letdown on Saturday past or 2 weeks ago. Going into this game might give them different energy, different start. There's not maybe the same expectations, but I'll wait and see.
Yeah, and heading into the game on Saturday, who are the players that Livy are going to need to be wary of, and how can we expect County to line up? I know you guys you mentioned there, you've gone to a 3-5-2. You've almost been playing with 2 guys up top in Brophy and White quite a lot recently.
Yeah, it's been interesting because since the January transfer window, it originally started as a kind of a basic 3-5-2, but with Conor Randall as the kind of right of the 3 centre halves, it can then very easily move into like a back 4 if needs to.
Yeah.
From left wing back and then slot in a left back. Danda can move from a number 10 role out into the left hand side, and we can still maintain the kind of 2 up front. So it is, it's very interchangeable there. So it gives a few different options. Brophy obviously has come in and delighted everyone with his performances so far. I think I read something about Kilmarnock and St Mirren fans talking about that will be frustrated with his kind of shoot on sight policy, anytime he gets the ball. But that was almost something that we were needing this season. We were, I think, the bottom of like shots on target or, you know, shots taken so far this season, you know. So it's almost good to have someone in there that isn't afraid to, when they've got a sight, you know, have a pop, and if it goes miles over the bar, so be it. But you know, we're getting into those positions. So Brophy, I think Jan Danda's been a really good signing as well. He's really creative, technically.
I was about to say with Danda, he was struggling a bit fitness wise at the start of the season, wasn't he? But he's kind of come in since the World Cup break, and he's looked pretty lively.
Yeah, he'd only played a handful of games last season for Swansea, so I think coming in, and then you know the expectations that he's going to kind of be your star man and things like that. You know, there's a lot of match fitness and things like that. He had to kind of get up to the speed of the Scottish game and that too. But he's been excellent, especially in recent weeks. I think he's got 3 goals in his last 4 home games. You know, I don't think he's scored an away goal yet, but
here's hoping that trend stays on pattern for Saturday.
But he's the most creative player in that county team. You know, he can play a pass quite easily, play a ball through the back 4, back 3. To someone like Brophy, I think his movement's been very good for him, you know, and Jordan as well. Jordan's your traditional target man with having a runner off him like Brophy. It's been good.
Big fan of Jordan from his time at Livi. He played in a pretty horrendous Livi team, but he did very well over the 2 seasons. I think he averaged a goal every 3 games for us in that team, which is pretty remarkable given how poor they were.
Well, I think Jordan's kind of, he's one of these strikers that for supporters, he's Marmite. You either love him because of you see the work rate that he puts in on a pitch. You know, he'll chip in with the odd goal. What he does off the ball, his hold up play, his link up play, and then to others he'll be like, well, he's not scoring enough goals, and you know, maybe to like an untrained eye as such, you know, that
exactly the same was.
Yeah. You know, you're looking for someone to get 10, 15 goals. Jordan's got 7 this season, so he could quite easily hit double figures between now and the end of the season. But I think, like so last season, that was a lot of his criticism, that because the 2 wide players were getting so many goals, it's like, well, why have we not got a number 9 that's going to chip in there? But so many of Charles Cook and Hungbo's goals came from, you know, Jordan's link-up plays, flick-ons, you know, him holding up defenders. I've always linked it to the Liverpool front 3 of Salah, Firmino and Mane at the time, that I think Firmino was getting a lot of pelts because he wasn't getting the amount of goals that Salah and Mane were at the time. And it's you know, obviously not to the same level, but it's, you know, it's a decent comparison that the number 9 is kind of crucial to that. And I think it was more at the start of the season, our wingers learning how to play with Jordan than Jordan learning how to play with our wingers, because if they could replicate what they did last season, we wouldn't be in this position. But no, I'm a big Jordan White fan. He's, you know, as I said there, the power work he puts in on a football pitch is excellent. Another player that's actually come in January, and I've been very impressed with him so far, is Euan Edwards. He came in from Wigan, and he's kind of like a wing back / winger. We've played him on the right the last kind of couple of home games, and he's been very good. He's very tricky, got a decent yard of pace to get past someone, can put decent balls into the box. He's experienced as well. I think that was one key thing, that in the January transfer window we managed to get good kind of experienced pros in, kind of good leaders in the dressing room and things, you know. So I think that's definitely led to an improvement in performances too. Players that been there, done it, they can use their experience to drag teams out of relegation fights and things. So no, look, I think I'm optimistic for Saturday. You know, obviously that record there, as we said earlier on, isn't great down at Almonvale, but you know, it'd be nice to pick up 2 wins down there in a season. When was the last time that happened? Probably back in 2013.
Yeah, it will be, because I think we had an 18-month unbeaten record at home when we come up from the 3rd and 2nd division, and then you guys ended, I think you guys won 3-0, if I remember correctly, and then there was the game, I think just before you clinched promotion, you beat us 3-1. But in terms of where Livi can potentially cause Ross County problems, is there any potential weaknesses that we could exploit?
Well, I think you know, Jack Baldwin's suspension is a hammer blow for us. You know, he was a really important part of the county backline. So, you know, Keith Watson going in there is an experienced pro, but I think it'll be interesting to see kind of how you guys try and exploit the county back 3 or back 4 at the however they line up at the time. I think having watched your highlights, you know, Newbley trying to expose Freeman on the Dundee United right hand side was a mismatch.
Yeah.
And I guess my worry is that he's kind of a similar build that, you know, you might look at it and think Newbley might play off George Harman on the left-hand side. You know, Harman's he's a very good left back, but he's not the most physical left back. So I guess, you know, if you're going to kind of exploit any weaknesses there, I think it'll probably be there. When it's going to be Watson and Jakoviti, I actually think they're better defensively when they're playing against a target man rather than a striker that's going to make runs off them, try and get in behind them. You know, it's not the quickest back line there. So, you know, if you've got Anderson making runs off, you know, you've got Bradley there as well. I think that's maybe a couple of areas that could be exploited, but we'll wait and see.
And if I had to go for a prediction then, Ross, what are you going for?
2-1 County.
I mean, you have to be positive.
I have to be. You know, it's look, with our run between now and the split, you know, it's yourselves. We've got Celtic at home, St Johnstone away, Aberdeen at home, and Hearts away. You know, so we've got to look at, you know, where we can potentially pick up points. And we've gone down to Almond Vale this season, picked up 3 points. You know, there might be a bit of a, you know, point to prove after the game in January as well. They might feel a bit aggrieved at that, considering the performance. I mean, you know, if Cancola scored when it was 0-0, I think it's a completely different game.
Yeah, that game, the best, I think from memory, we were clinical. I think is the best way I described our performance up there. I thought it was professional and clinical, but County went and scored early doors in the second half. That was essentially Bruce Anderson was the difference in that game.
I agree. So yeah, no, it'll be interesting, and fingers crossed that 3 points come back up the A9.
I really hope they don't. The nicest possible way, Ross. But you run the County Corner account on Twitter.
Yes.
I believe you are planning to get a wee podcast on the go as well.
Yes. So we're just putting the kind of final plans in place for that. There was a few delays that had kind of gone on, but we're now past that and looking to kind of kick on, especially just towards the end of the season, and then especially into the start of next season, you know, kind of get content really going out. But yeah, the County Corner on Twitter is, if you enjoy your stats or information about Ross County on the performances, things like that, then that's my page, and give it a follow if it does interest you.
Well, I encourage anyone to go give Ross a follow. He's spoke to him numerous times on the SFF podcast. He's very knowledgeable when it comes to his team. So I encourage you to tune into that when he gets that up and running. But Ross, thanks very much for coming on the podcast, and best of luck for the rest of the season as well.
Cheers, Euan. Thank you. You too.
That's it for this week's episode of Talk Livi. Thanks again to every single one of you for tuning in week in and week out. If you can, we'd love to hear your feedback. Either leave us a review on iTunes or simply message us on Twitter, Facebook or Instagram.
As Angus said, we are on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Search Talk Livi to find us, and you'll find all the links to our weekly episodes on there as well. You can also find all our episodes, including this one, on all good podcast streaming sites, including iTunes and Spotify. And we're also on YouTube, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel. None of those options suit you though. All you have to do is head to our website, talklivipodcast.libsyn.com, where you'll find every single episode we've done over the last few years.
That's it for this week. Thanks again to all our listeners for tuning in. Let's hope for another great week following the Lothian's finest football team.
West Lothian is our battle cry. This is the place from which we hail. Livingston, oh Livingston, it's up to Almondvale. Livingston, 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 oh Livingston, oh Livingston, we love it when you score. Livingston, oh Livingston, the Almondvale Lions roar. Livingston.